Hello guys and welcome to my video. It's Moshmain, and in this video I'm going to analyze the poem You Laughed and Laughed and Laughed by Gabriel O'Gara. Before we dive into the analysis, I want us to read the poem as a whole and look at the structure of the poem. The poem reads as follows: You laughed and laughed and laughed by Gabriel O'Gara. In your ears, my song is motor car misfiring, stopping with a choking cough, and you laughed and laughed and laughed. In your eyes, my antenatal walk was inhuman, passing your omnivorous understanding, and you laughed and laughed and laughed. You laughed at my song, you laughed at my walk. Then I danced my magic dance to the rhythm of talking drums pleading, but you shut your eyes and laughed and laughed and laughed. And then I opened my mystic inside wide, like the sky. Instead, you entered your car and laughed and laughed and laughed. You laughed at my dance. You laughed at my inside. You laughed and laughed and laughed. But your laughter was ice block laughter, and it froze your inside, froze your voice, froze your ears, froze your eyes, and froze your tongue. And now it's my turn to laugh. But my laughter is not ice block laughter, for I know not cars, no, not ice blocks. My laughter is the fire of the eye of the sky, the fire of the earth, the fire of the air, the fire of the seas and the rivers, fishes, animals, trees, and it thawed your inside, thawed your voice, thawed your ears, thawed your eyes, and thawed your tongue. So a meek wonder held your shadow, and you whispered, "Why so?" And I answered, "Because my fathers and I are owned by the living warmth of the earth through our naked feet." So now let's look at the structure of the poem. The poem You Laughed and Laughed and Laughed consists of 10 stanzas that are not equal in length. It has no defined meter, no consistent rhyming scheme, and no specified length or formal requirement. The only consistent form it takes is that of repetition of the title at the end of the first 4 stanzas and again in stanza number 7. Now let's look at the analysis of the poem for each stanza. So in stanza number 1, the speaker portrays the attitude of white people toward African songs. The sound of their song is harsh and loud, so the whites do not understand it. As a result, it sounds to them like a motor car misfiring. When a motor car is making an awkward noise. He says, white people do not value African culture. Instead, they laugh and laugh and laugh. The repetition of laughed and laughed and laughed adds to the beauty of the poem, as the words emphasize the racial discrimination that black people experienced. So now let's look at stanza number 2. In stanza number 2, Africans were not stylish and modern as white people, so they were laughed for their walk. What their walk was compared to a walk of a pregnant woman, antenatal walk, which is considered inhuman, and they were laughed for that. They were laughed, meaning passing your omnivorous understanding, and you laughed and laughed and laughed. This line means that white people didn't even bother to understand the work of Africans. Instead, they laughed. So now let's look at stanza number 3. And stanza number 3 consists of only 2 lines. These 2 lines summarizes and put emphasis on how white people mock Africans for their song and walk. Then let's move to stanza number 4. So according to stanza number 4, Africans tried to show their cultural dance to white people. Instead, white people closed their eyes to avoid looking at the dance, and they laughed and laughed and laughed. Magic dance represent cultural dance, African cultural dances. Then let's look at stanza number 5. So in this stanza, the blacks invited the white people to experience the beauty of their world, their nature, where they live in. Instead of the white to enjoy the space, they preferred their cars, their material world. They preferred sitting in their cars and avoid the nature of Africans, the nature of African culture. So stanza 6 consists of only 2 lines, and those 2 lines emphasizes the way whites laughed at everything that mattered most to the Africans, which is their culture and dance. So let's look at stanza number 7. In this stanza, the speaker describes the continuous laughter of the whites as icy cold, meaning that mocking freezes their ability to emphasize with Africans and the sense of understanding of African culture. Furthermore, their laughter closed up all their senses of the whites, the senses of hearing, seeing, and tasting, preventing them from relating to Africans. So in stanza number 8, the speaker uses the word "and" to indicate a change, meaning that it is now the turn of Africans to laugh. But then their laughter is not a mocking laughter like the laughter of the white people. Africans are not materialistic and they are naturally warm-natured, unlike the whites. Therefore, they do not mock the white people. The words "no," not cars, "no," not ice block, meaning that they don't have material things, and they are not cold, meaning that they are not cold-hearted. They are warm-hearted. They have good hearts. Now let's move to stanza number 9. So in stanza number 9, the laughter of African people is compared to the eye of the sky, which is the sun, that light up the earth, the air, seas, and rivers. So the sun, because it is the fire, it has been given the ability to melt white people's hearts. So the speaker uses fine elements of the earth to intensify how fire can melt their frozen hearts. So the last stanza concludes the poem. It is at this point that the white man realizes that despite all the humiliations the Africans endured, they are still warm-hearted people. They are very close to nature, meaning that they are the children of the sun, they are the children of the nature, and they are warm-hearted. So now let's look at the themes of the poem. The first theme is racism. So the issue of racism is depicted strongly throughout the poem. The speaker raises the disgrace of racial intolerance with special reference to white people mocked Africans for their music and dance. And the second theme is culture, because African culture is mocked and ridiculed by white people who misunderstand their songs and dance. White people show no empathy with the culture of Africans and misunderstand the connectivity that Africans have with nature. So let's look at the tones and themes of the poem. The tone of the poem is humiliating and offensive, and the mood is strength and resilient. So now let's look at the figurative language, the literal devices in the poem. The first one is repetition. The constant repetition of the title, "You laughed and laughed and laughed," emphasizes the humiliation black people suffered at the hand of the colonials. And in stanza 7 to 9, the laughter of white is compared to ice blocks. And in stanza 9, the poet compares his laughter with fire. There is also a contrast. The poet uses contrast between the black indigenous African culture and the white colonial tradition. We also have images to capture beauty and energy. The poet uses natural element, water, the sky, and fire to portray images. We have reached the end of our video. Please support me by subscribing, liking, and commenting. Thank you.